Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Hello. Thanks for joining us on Mission Evolution. We're coming to you on XZTV and Simul TV from our broadcast studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, bringing the latest evolutionary information from today's leading experts. This hour will discuss whether we're at the eve of destruction or at a new dawn. Dire predictions are nothing new. Prophecies of the end of the world have been a topic of discussion and debate as long as most of us can remember. Yet, looking around us at climate change, political unrest, war, and pandemics, it becomes clear that this time we may indeed be in trouble. Are we doomed, or is there a way to transform these seeming crises into evolution? With us this hour to consider the situation and our options therein is Carolyn Baker. Carolyn was a psychiatrist in private practice for 20 years and a professor of psychology and history for 10. She's the author of 15 books. Carolyn has also co-authored 4 books with Andrew Harvey, including their latest, Radical Regeneration, Sacred Activism, and the Renewal of the World. Her website, carolynbaker.net. Carolyn, thanks for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here today.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And you're in wonderful sunny Colorado.
Yes,
Yeah.
I am.
All
Loving
right.
it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful state. So, you were a psychologist and worked with teaching history and psychology. How did you get into doomsday?
Well, back it was about 2007, I watched a documentary called What a Way to Go, Life at the End of Empire, which is now on YouTube. You can watch it for free. And I connected with the filmmakers and many of the people who were featured in the film, who were scientists, teachers, researchers. And I really began to educate myself about the state of the world and the global crisis, which we're now calling the polycrisis, because so many of these issues are connected with each other, making for a real predicament that is not solvable, unlike a problem which we can solve. And so from there, I began to research collapse and then to write about it. I wrote my first book on collapse in 2008 called Sacred Demise, Walking the Spiritual Path of Industrial Civilization's Collapse, because I really saw the spiritual and psychological implications of this event, series of events. And so that's when I began to write about it and think more deeply about it.
Well, as a person that's been involved with history and psychology, this isn't the first time. I mean, it seems like there's been predictions of the end of the world as long as there's been time. What makes it different right now, in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, I don't like the expression end of the world because I don't think that's what's happening. I think there is a massive cataclysmic and potentially transformational experience happening for all of us. And I don't really buy that this is the end of everything. We're going to go completely extinct. I think we're going to see a lot of endings and a lot of extinction, which we're already starting to see now. But I think one of the things that makes this different is that we have so many ways of looking at it and dealing with it that we refuse to consider, that really makes this kind of unprecedented in certain ways.
Would you go into that a little bit? What ways do we have that we aren't looking at?
In terms of actually reversing climate chaos, I don't think we really have the opportunity to do that anymore. We've gone too far with that. But there are ways that we can respond, and that we can accept our predicament. We can certainly mitigate a lot of aspects of climate change, but to erase it, to end it, we've gone too far. And
Well,
every IPCC report that we get from the United Nations really reinforces that.
how much of the climate change crisis that we're in is cyclic, and how much of it is because of humans getting their nasty little hands on the situation?
Well, at this point, I think it's mostly the latter. Yes, we've had climate cycles, throughout human history and before humans were here. But it is now undebatable that humans are primary causes of the climate situation. And humans have created it. Humans have had the opportunity to reverse it. We haven't done that. And now we have a predicament on our hands. That the difference between a problem and a predicament is problems you can solve, predicaments you can only respond to. And so my work has been all about how do we respond spiritually and emotionally and in every other way to this catastrophe.
It sounds like the people at large have kind of been in denial about our impact on the planet.
Oh,
What's
yes.
what's change? Is that changing now? And if so, what's changing it?
I don't see that changing very much at the moment.
That
Um,
could be problematic.
well, it's extremely problematic, and that's why I'm not hopeful about the future. That's why I see us, really moving into a dire situation, because we have not been willing to look at, particularly in the United States, we have not been willing to look at this situation head on and respond to the predicament, as we should.
Well, it seems like we've been a fairly proactive culture in all other aspects, or in
Yes.
many other aspects. Why is this such a sacred cow? Why are people in such denial about this?
It's an existential issue. It has to do with life and death. And how many of us really want to deal with life and death? We've got jobs, we've got careers, we've got kids, we've got obligations in our lives, we got family and friends. Why would we want to look at this?
Who-
And
Is
yet
part
we must.
Yeah. Is part of it due to just plain old narcissism? Everybody's all about their comforts, and they want things that they have and they want more, and they don't want to look at anything that would deprive them of that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And, we are I believe, particularly in America, but throughout the West, we are a very immature culture. We have not, as Indigenous people have throughout history, experienced rites of passage that help us grow up and mature. And so we're kind of like little adolescents running around being entitled and, wanting our comforts and not being able to go very deep with reality. And now we have all kinds of not only denial, but lies about the status of our planet and our cultures.
Who's propagating these lies?
Well, I think it's very easy for people to, when they are in a state of denial, to be attracted to um, the anti-facts of our situation. It's much easier to say, well, yeah, climate change is a hoax. Nobody can prove that. I don't think, I don't want to be dealing with that. It's all made up by, and then whatever follows is a conspiracy theory. That's very easy to get sucked into if you're not emotionally mature enough to look at reality.
Well, I've heard a lot of people say that the climate change is a conspiracy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. These are usually people who say that, vaccines are a hoax. People who say that we should be fearful because people of color are going to replace us in the near future, and we should be on our defense, and that's why we need our weapons, and that's why we need to not be reading about different races and different cultures in school, and that's why we should be afraid of LGBTQ people, and on and on and on.
It seems like this is being fueled by something outside of just denial. What do you think is really behind it all? This propaganda, if you want to call it that.
Well, if you want to be really basic, I would say fear.
Okay.
We're in very turbulent times. And if we don't know how to respond to those times, personally, physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, then we're going to make up stuff that helps us cope. And so I think, it's our own vulnerability as humans, as immature human beings, which is fed by opportunists who see this as a great way to make money and grab power.
Money and power. Does it always go back to that?
It seems like it.
Yeah, it's kind of a sad state of affairs. So we have a little bit of time left in this segment, but is this novel? I mean, you worked with history. Have there been crises like this in the past that have been this intense, or would it, if so, would it have been before we crawled into the caves and crawled back out?
Well, I would say that we've had crises this intense, but certainly not the technology and the media that we have today to make everyone aware of it. And we have a pace of life that has never been this fast and really this debilitating and demanding of our attention.
Yeah, it seems like things are moving so rapidly, we don't have time to think them through.
Right. Exactly.
And so we just catch a snippet of this and a snippet of that and a snippet of that. And if it catches our interest, then it comes into the brain. And if it doesn't catch our interest, it doesn't. So we're incompletely educating ourselves. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we really have people in, I'm speaking now about the United States. We have people in this country who would really like to destroy our public education system. And they've been, attending to that for several decades. And as a result, I see our culture really having been dumbed down and getting dumber every day. Problems such as gun violence, which we saw more of yesterday, are not being responded to intelligently. There's a lot of denial. There's a lot of entitlement around that. And, we make up stuff to make ourselves feel better. And all the while, educationally, we're getting dumbed down. So it's a struggle these days to be really informed, and a struggle to really be educated about the facts.
It's an interesting phenomenon. And like I said, we're about out of time in this segment. We'll pick it up on the other side. But it's an interesting phenomenon how it all starts with education in this culture. I mean, if we tend to grow up believing what we've been educated to believe, and yet that's failing us. And that's a really scary situation. So
And by the way, I just like to say that I publish a daily news digest 7 days a week, unless I'm traveling or I'm ill, which covers economics, the environment, world issues, and then ends with something no other news digest does, a spiritual inspiration section at the very end. So if people want to subscribe to that, they can go to my website, carolynbaker.net, and click on the subscription.
It is that time. Carolyn and I will return very shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
Question: what is the name of the unique blend of coffee you get that has been formulated by a neurologist, a neurobiologist, and a pharmaceutical chemist? Answer: you get Beautiful Mind Coffee, a unique coffee blend that tastes great and has herbal ingredients that your brain will love, and it is not just coffee, it's brainalicious. Dr. Rathbone, Dr. Jang, and Dr. Winslow, the scientific team that created Beautiful Mind Coffee, decided to collaborate on a coffee focusing on brain health. As for those herbal ingredients found in Beautiful Mind Coffee, Dr. Rathbone, Dr. Jang, and Dr. Winslow, utilizing their combined extensive scientific research background, worked with many natural and herbal products until the exact formulation that is found in Beautiful Mind Coffee was created. With a unique scientific formula not found in any other coffee being sold or served, Beautiful Mind Coffee is the only coffee blend that contains 3 herbal ingredients found to aid in boosting your daily mental clarity and focus. Every cup of Beautiful Mind Coffee contains scientifically formulated amounts of maca root powder, green tea extract, and American ginseng, all supporting good brain health. Taking care of your brain's health now can help delay or prevent the onset of cognitive dysfunction, including dementia, Alzheimer's, and more general memory loss as you get older, just by enjoying the delicious flavor of our roasted coffee and herbal ingredients found exclusively in Beautiful Mind Coffee. Did you know that cognitive dysfunction also refers to deficits in attention, verbal and nonverbal learning, short-term and working memory, visual and auditory processing, problem solving, processing speed, and motor functioning? For more on Beautiful Mind Coffee, the 3 scientists who formulated Beautiful Mind Coffee, and more details on the 3 unique herbal ingredients in Beautiful Mind Coffee, visit www.beautifulmindcoffee.ca. Beautiful Mind Coffee is now available online at amazon.ca and amazon.com. To order Beautiful Mind Coffee, visit www.beautifulmindcoffee.ca today.
Hello again. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us this hour discussing these challenging times is Carolyn Baker. Her website, carolynbaker.net. Carolyn, you said something that really caught my interest earlier, and that's you mentioned that this seeming time of destruction, if you will, is actually conserve a purpose. Would you mind going into that a little bit?
Well, it can serve a purpose if we are paying attention. Stephen Jenkinson, who's a great author and teacher who lives in British Columbia, I believe, he wrote the book Die Wise. And one of my favorite quotes from Jenkinson is, "We live in a dangerous time. We can either consider that an affliction or an assignment." And so the greater purpose, I believe, in these times is to ask ourselves, what might be my assignment? What is this crisis calling me to look at and then to do? So the 2 questions that I ask everyone to hang out with as we look at the global crisis are these 2 questions. Who do I want to be? And what did I come here to do? And if we follow those questions, if we let our hearts and minds take us into those questions deeply, then I think that will determine how we live our lives in the face of the poly crisis.
But that takes a fair amount of introspection, does it not?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
What percentage of the population right now do you think is willing or able to do that level of introspection?
Well, I think it comes in stages. It doesn't happen overnight. As people are willing to, say, begin to look at the climate situation, our first impulse is, well, I want to fix this. We got to fix this. Oh my God, let's all get together and fix this. And, then we realize, well, that's really not happening. And, oh, wow, I just had this tornado like down the street. Or, oh my God, there was this forest fire up the hills, a few miles. And then we begin, I believe, if we are able, then we begin to look deeper. Every time there's a school shooting, it's an invitation for us to look at the existential realities of our world and to ask ourselves some very deep questions about meaning and purpose. All of these things are wake-up calls, alarm bells, and, we can certainly keep going back to sleep. We can certainly continue to ignore, but they keep ringing louder and louder, demanding us to pay attention and take up whatever we are called to do and to be. And not everyone's going to do that. This isn't about how many people see what's going on and then respond to it. It's about how will I turn up? How will I show up? This is about me in response to what's happening in the world and what nature and the earth is asking of me.
And it's nothing like having it in your backyard to kind of bring that to the fore, is there?
As I did last year,
Yeah.
in the middle of winter, we had a forest fire.
Yes, I remember that. It's like, holy moly. Okay, you speak of global psychoses. Would you go into that a little bit for us?
Yeah. Well, we've certainly disconnected from nature, from each other, and from ourselves. And, we've lost the kind of grounding and connectedness that our indigenous ancestors had, that allowed them to constantly be in intimate relationship with Earth and to make their decisions about how they wanted to live in relation to the Earth. How
Now,
would this connection or disconnection affect everyone?
yeah, now that's another interesting thing is like, clearly the indigenous people lived here for thousands of years with no footprint. However, there was not that many people then. There's a
Mhm,
bunch of us now. To
mhm.
think that we can go back to indigenous ways, is that even practical?
No, I'm not talking about going back to indigenous ways in terms of living like indigenous people, but having that kind of sensibility, having that kind of spiritual and emotional connection with nature that allows us to be guided in our decisions, informed by that connection with ourselves, with each other, and with the earth. We
And
can
I
all do that.
Yeah, I won't argue, except that when children are born in the city, brought up in the city, live inside,
Mhm.
brought up by TVs and tablets, they
Right.
don't have that opportunity. And they often see nature as something to be feared. So it does come back to there's so many of us that our lifestyles have changed in such a way that we aren't automatically exposed to that connection. How can we correct that?
Well, that's part of the activism that we can engage in our communities to get involved in helping children have that kind of connection, in helping everyone have that kind of connection. And that goes into the piece that we have in Radical Regeneration about sacred activism, the marriage of spirituality and activism. And we can all get involved in our communities in ways that call us to be sacred activists.
Well, it's certainly a challenge with as many people as we have that have their life situation from birth has prevented them from developing a relationship with nature. And it continues to be that way. Everything is on a screen. And,
Mhm.
how can one person make a difference there? I mean, it's easy when you're in Colorado, okay? Um, we have nature all around us, but there's more populated places where people are struggling hand to mouth to make the rent.
Mhm.
How can we correct that? How can we correct it there?
Again, I would just say we can get involved. Maybe it's, get involved in our communities to make sure that people are not going hungry, to get involved in our communities to help children know that there's something outside of the skyscrapers and the concrete, and, help them really connect. We can be doing these kinds of things in our communities, through our schools, and through our churches, and any other ways that we can get involved. And to stop thinking, well, I've got to get millions of people changed in order to make a difference. My efforts are useless unless we do big things in big places that just roll everything back to where I think it should be. That's probably not going to happen.
At this stage, probably not. So, what are personal and collective shadows, and how do they play in here?
Well, the person that I'm a huge fan of, that I talk about a lot in my writing, Carl Jung, said he was one of the first people to start talking about the human shadow, and to educate us to the reality that, when we're young, we very quickly find out what is acceptable to the people around us and what isn't. And so we begin to send away parts of ourselves that we don't think are quite acceptable to others. And it's kind of like we put them in a bag behind us, well, this isn't acceptable. They don't like that. I better not do this. And so those all go in this long black bag that we drag around with us throughout our adolescence and our early adulthood. And then, usually around midlife, things begin to take place in our lives that cause us to maybe begin to look at what we've been carrying around, this long black bag, also known as the shadow. Sometimes we don't look, and life kind of hits us upside the head and bites us, and we have to look at it. These are parts of us that we've sent away, that we consider unacceptable. And because we're not dealing with them, they can erupt in our lives, in our personal lives, and in our cultures as well. So I have been very involved for a lot of years in talking about the personal and collective shadow. And that is something that must come into our activity as sacred activists if we are going to radically regenerate this planet.
Why?
Why? Because if we don't deal with this dark side, with this shadow, it will erupt. And it has erupted culturally. It erupts in our personal lives, and we suddenly start doing things that are out of character and like, oh, wow, that wasn't me. That is, of course, what we say with every mass shooting, Oh, that's not us. That's not who we are. Well, yeah, that's exactly who we are if we look at our shadows.
So, how does the shadow work relate to the climate crisis that we're in?
Oh, absolutely. It's everything. It's like being willing to look at, how have I helped create this crisis? Not beating ourselves up, but being willing to look at that entitlement, being willing to look at that greedy, grasping part of ourselves that wants this and wants that no matter what, to be willing to look at that disconnected part of ourselves with nature, and to have compassion on ourselves for the choices that we've made.
So,
And
how does the shadow work play in with the denial that we were talking about when we first started the program?
oh, it's everything. It's like shadow wants to protect our ego. This is who I am. I am this good person who is always honest and always truthful. And, I don't hurt people. I'm a good person. And in part, that's true. But there's the other part, there's the shadow part that we're not aware of, that we need to come to terms with because it has erupted personally and collectively to create the crisis that we're in.
Do you think if we're coming from our shadow, even in our activism, that we are misguided and directed in a way that may not be useful?
We can, absolutely. And that's why in sacred activism, that's part of the sacred is, going within ourselves and checking in with our motives and our feelings, being emotionally educated about what we feel and why we're feeling it, and checking ourselves to make sure that we're not acting out of the shadow, but that we go ahead.
Do you see that acting out of the shadow in activism has given it a bad rap over the years?
Yes, I think that part of the reason for that is that we have separated spirituality from activism. And, many activists who do not really consider spirituality important will say, I don't want to get involved in spirituality because I don't know that any of that is real. I just want to do my activism because if I get involved in spirituality, that will make me weak and inefficient as an activist. Then on the other side, there are people who want to be involved in spirituality, but they don't want to get near the activism because that would somehow make them not spiritual.
So isn't activism a nice handy place to project your denials if you aren't processed?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great place to act out the shadow if you're not doing your own shadow work and your own spiritual work. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we're just about to come to the end of this segment, and but on the other side, I'd like to go deeper into this activism and how we can be conscious within it.
Absolutely.
Carolyn and I will be right back to continue this discussion. So you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
So I was watching the XZTV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com.
simultv.com.
Hi there. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Our guest this hour is Carolyn Baker. Her website, carolynbaker.net. Carolyn, we were discussing activism, and it seems like when we talk about activism, or the word activism brings up the fires in the streets and the protests and the, that tend to lead to violence. But the activism you're talking about is different. How is it different?
Well, the kind of activism that you just described is very fed by the ego. And it's, I got to get out there and make a difference because this is what I should do. This is what I got to do. And sacred activism is much more about following the calling of the heart. What is, as Andrew Harvey says, what is breaking my heart right now? That I just can't, let go of. It's calling me so deeply. And maybe that has to do with working with animals. Maybe that has to do with working with seniors who are incapacitated and need companionship. Maybe that has to do with something regarding the environment. There are gazillions, endless ways of working and expressing our compassion in the world, expressing our capacity to make a difference in just a very small space, but a very powerful difference that impacts others and impacts ourselves. And
How
so,
can we, Carolyn, how can we tell when we're doing this if our promptings are coming from our ego or if they're coming from our true nature? How can we tell that we're not projecting into a situation rather
right,
than dealing with it?
that's where the shadow work comes in. That's where our spiritual awareness and introspection come in, and our emotional intelligence and our body intelligence. Following, when I work with people, I do a lot of work with folks around getting in touch with what they're feeling in their bodies and where. And when we start getting that awareness of, okay, I'm feeling this right now in this particular area, and that feels different from when I'm, in my ego and I'm pushing myself to get out there and make a difference because I got to save the world, or if I don't do it, it won't get done, or whatever, And so we tune into what we're feeling in our bodies, and that begins to inform us of where we're coming from, literally, and what our motivation actually is. And then as we follow what feels true and authentic and not from the ego, that can really inform us of where we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be doing.
There's another interesting thing that I think plays in here, and that's our perceptions. It seems like, as a psychologist, this, you can be in a room and something goes on, you have 20 people in the room, there's going to be 20 different descriptions of what happened. How do our perceptions impact our ability or impact us in being able to recognize what's going on, what a problem is, so that we can be activist in the right direction?
Well, I think that's where we really need to cultivate a practice of inner listening. Meditation can help us with that. Any kind of stillness practice, journaling. There are many, many tools that we can use that will help us really tune into what's going on with ourselves and what our motivation truly is. We have not now, currently in the world, we have more tools than we've ever had for tuning into ourselves. And so let's use them.
A lot of those tools are quite ancient, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But they're being revived. They're being brought back to our attention. And many of them are very valuable. So let's do it. I'm a big fan of journaling. Not everyone is. There are other ways that we can access what's going on inside ourselves. I'm about to publish a new book myself called Apocalypse Anytime. And it's really a devotional,
So how,
interspiritual devotional.
Carolyn, how do our perceptions impact our experience?
Our perceptions always impact our experience. And we need to learn and utilize tools that help us process those perceptions so that we're not just acting on, some knee-jerk response to our perceptions, but that we process those perceptions so that they come out in the ways that serve humanity and serve the earth and serve ourselves.
I think part of what I was trying to get at here is, in order to become activist or in order to start to try to act to make a difference, we first have to recognize there's a problem. And it seems like there's a difficulty in seeing a problem and not going into negativity and victim and helplessness. So, how does a person find a balance there, and where is that helplessness coming from?
As Stephen Jenkinson said, we live in dangerous times. We can accept this as an affliction or as an assignment. So we have to have the emotional and spiritual maturity to say, I'm not being victimized. This is a wake-up call. What am I going to do with it? Not from my ego, but from my soul, from my deepest self. How am I being asked to respond here? What gifts do I have to give? Compassion is needed here. Honesty is needed here. Love is needed here. And so how can I tap into those gifts and offer those to the world without shame, without blame, but because it's the right thing to do?
So, it sounds like the process of finding a way to change adversity into opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as simple as not simple as that.
But it's kind of difficult to make that leap, isn't it? I mean, we're kind of conditioned to look, the news. If what does my producer say? If it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. We're taught to go into drama trauma rather than transmute something. How can we make that shift?
All of my work that I've been writing about and doing for 15 years has been about becoming conscious. And that's a process. That's a journey. And what I'm asking in my work, what Andrew and I are asking in Radical Regeneration is wake up, look at what's going on, and look at how you can respond to this, and get to the bottom of these issues and become conscious. And that allows you to know how to respond. This is a process of developing emotional and spiritual intelligence, depth of compassion, and then the willingness to act.
Sounds
It's
like
not rocket science.
sounds like childhood's end.
It's like what?
Childhood's end.
Yeah, exactly. Initiation into the adult realities of human living.
It's sad that we have to choose to do that as adults at the ages a lot of us are facing.
Yes,
And it's a difficult transition. We've had no models for it, have we?
exactly. Yeah. It's a rite of passage experience, which I believe all of this is. I believe that the collapse of industrial civilization is a huge call to a rite of passage. And the tragedy is that we have not been prepared for it, unlike kids in indigenous cultures were and still are in some cases. And so we have to walk this path without a lot of instruction, but supporting each other.
How much do you think that the invalidation of our elders has led us to this dilemma?
Oh, absolutely. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And, elderhood has nothing to do with age. It's all about wisdom. We all know people in their 80s and 90s who really aren't very wise. And I don't know about you, but I know lots of people in their 20s and 30s who are wise beyond their years. So it's about this accumulation of wisdom and consciousness and compassion and the willingness to be present to this and then to act.
Speaking of which, I've seen, I think we all have seen a lot of very exceptional, very young people showing up during this time of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is?
I suppose we could say that it's because of, all the advancements in science and technology. I don't have really any theories about, these are like really evolved beings that are coming to us. I don't know about that. But I certainly think that young people have been forced to, through the fast pace of our cultures, have been forced to grow up very quickly and respond in ways that they're probably emotionally not ready for, which is all the more reason that they need good elders and good parents to help them with that. But I'm really excited about that generation. The young ones who are coming up, they need elders that they can rely on. And we as elders need to stand back and honor them and support them in the ways that we can.
Absolutely. And it seems like this generation that they're relying on for this has actually grown up in a form of immaturity. I mean, when we were coming out of the wars and this and that, our parents really wanted to provide all these wonderful things for us, and spoiled us rotten in a lot of regards. And the things that our advancements have provided for us have kind of spoiled us rotten. So there's this generation on either side that have known hardship. Our young ones are knowing hardship. They're waking up to this, and we're not. So how can we rally to be there for them when we don't have the tools ourselves?
Well, I would certainly invite elders who are conscious, who are waking up to the global crisis and wanting to be involved as sacred activists, to simply, befriend or get to know a person of a younger generation, and then to make amends. Whenever I am in the presence of younger kids, Generation Z, Y, X, whatever, I like to make a point of saying, the boomers have screwed up the planet worse than any generation in history. And I am really sorry. I apologize to you. That doesn't make it right, but I want you to know my heart hurts and I'm sorry.
So taking responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and modeling that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating, the children that we do have coming up, and that's what gives me hope personally. How about you?
Yeah. Hope is a strange word, and sometimes hope and fear travel together. So, I don't know about hope. I try to live one day at a time and do the best that I can as a sacred activist and a person who's trying to be conscious and awake and compassionate. But I really don't know about the future. It's very uncertain.
But isn't it always?
Oh, yeah.
So we're just about out of time in this segment, but I want to introduce what we're going to talk about next. And that would be, you speak of birthing the new human in the age of extinction.
Right.
So would you start on that, and then we'll take it up on the other side of the break.
Okay, sure.
No, would you start on it now?
Okay, sure. Yeah, birthing the new human is really about having the eyes open to the possibility that this crisis is creating the possibility of a new species of human.
Fantastic. And that is what we're going to talk about in the next segment.
All right.
But for now, we have to take a little break. Please stay with us as Carol and I continue to explore the global crisis. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
Question: what is the name of the unique blend of coffee you get that has been formulated by a neurologist, a neurobiologist, and a pharmaceutical chemist? Answer: you get Beautiful Mind Coffee, a unique coffee blend that tastes great and has herbal ingredients that your brain will love, and it is not just coffee, it's brainalicious. Dr. Rathbone, Dr. Jang, and Dr. Winslow, the scientific team that created Beautiful Mind Coffee, decided to collaborate on a coffee focusing on brain health. As for those herbal ingredients found in Beautiful Mind Coffee, Dr. Rathbone, Dr. Jang, and Dr. Winslow, utilizing their combined extensive scientific research background, worked with many natural and herbal products until the exact formulation that is found in Beautiful Mind Coffee was created. With a unique scientific formula not found in any other coffee being sold or served, Beautiful Mind Coffee is the only coffee blend that contains 3 herbal ingredients found to aid in boosting your daily mental clarity and focus. Every cup of Beautiful Mind coffee contains scientifically formulated amounts of maca root powder, green tea extract, and American ginseng, all supporting good brain health. Taking care of your brain's health now can help delay or prevent the onset of cognitive dysfunction, including dementia, Alzheimer's, and more general memory loss as you get older, just by enjoying the delicious flavor of our roasted coffee and herbal ingredients found exclusively in Beautiful Mind Coffee. Did you know that cognitive dysfunction also refers to deficits in attention, verbal and non-verbal learning, short-term and working memory, visual and auditory processing, problem-solving, processing speed, and motor functioning? For more on Beautiful Mind Coffee, the 3 scientists who formulated Beautiful Mind Coffee, and more details on the 3 unique herbal ingredients in Beautiful Mind Coffee, visit www.beautifulmindcoffee.ca. Beautiful Mind Coffee is now available online at amazon.ca and amazon.com. To order Beautiful Mind Coffee, visit www.beautifulmindcoffee.ca today.
Welcome back. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. This hour, our expert guest is Carolyn Baker. Her website, carolynbaker.net. Carolyn, as promised, we were going to talk about birthing the new human.
Yeah, we're not talking about a literal birth in a hospital. We're talking about the evolution of a new species. And it may be that this crisis and its repercussions produce a new species of human, in the sense of having been so traumatized and so impacted by the things that seem to be inevitable taking place on our planet, that as we come through that, those who do come through that will be really, really transformed by it. And I don't want to overestimate that or make it sound like, they're just going to become these glorified people who have no more problems. I think there might be a long period of time in which people who have experienced a lot of extinction are transformed by it in terms of their thinking and how they act. And, at some point, we might be looking at, it's a possibility that we might be looking at a very evolved new species of human who really have the old mentality of the indigenous, who really have said, oh my God, those people back there really knew what was going on. And we need to return to their wisdom, because look at it, what it has just created in the last 2 or 3 generations before us. And so we need to live differently. And we now have the capacity for that, because we've really been rocked and transformed by what humans in the recent past have created.
So are you talking about taking the wisdom and approach to life from the indigenous ones, but creating a way that we can live tomorrow, given our population and all the different things that are present now that weren't then?
I am talking about creating in ourselves and in our activism people who are open to a higher way of living, who are open to higher evolution, by doing the spiritual work that allows them to be open to that, that allows them to be transformed.
What do
And
you mean by higher?
I guess I'm really talking about the kind of perception that Indigenous folks did have, that all-encompassing wholeness of perception and inclusion of perception and connection with all that is, that allows folks to live in a different way than the way we're in now, which is creating extinction.
So you think our separatism is a big part of this?
It is enormous. It's really the bottom line. Our illusion that, we're disconnected from the earth and from each other, which ultimately produces disconnection from ourselves.
Now, that's been around a long time. From your history experience, when did we really start moving in that direction?
I think as things became modernized, as we moved into cities, as we left our habitats in nature, all of that, and then industrialization, the moving of different parts, and it was just one disconnection after another. And now here we are. And to get back that mentality, we're going to have to do some inner work as well as some outer work. And, I believe we're going to see some crises and catastrophes that are going to compel us to live in that way.
So you said that that people are going to, as we move through this, is going to be very traumatized.
Yes.
And that trauma might drive us into a new species. However, you also mentioned that is facing our shadows, facing our trauma. So how's that going to work? You're getting traumatized. How do you turn that into evolution?
I'm not quite understanding your question. Can you say it another way?
Okay. Yeah, I'll try. So you spoke about the trauma driving us into evolution, but we also spoke about trauma creating the shadow.
Mhm.
Okay. So how do you get those two to go together? How do
Well,
you
I
get?
think we need to, as much as possible right now, and this is part of the inner work that we need to do, is deal with our trauma, our current trauma that we have right now, so that as we face these cataclysms, that we are more grounded and regulated as we go through them, so that evolution can take place. Right now, we have so much trauma that we have to deal with. And if we don't know how to deal with it, then the potential for transformation and evolution are really blocked. So I really support people who are doing any kind of work on their own trauma and healing that, because I think it's absolutely necessary going forward.
There's also growing evidence that there is trauma that's passed down genetically, not just
Yes, epigenetically. Yes.
epigenetically. Yes. So how do we access that? I mean,
In the same way, it's like, okay, in my own life, I look back on former generations, I see their trauma. I know pretty much what it was, and it's in me. And so I've done a lot of work and continue to do a lot of work on dealing with that. I don't have any children, so I'm not going to be passing that on directly. But certainly if we do that work, that inner healing work, then we're less likely to pass it on. And we're more likely to pass on the healing that we're experiencing.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, that epigenetically we collected the trauma,
Mhm.
and if we correct the trauma, we can correct epigenetically so it's not passed on?
I think I don't know how much control we have of that, but nature, nurture, environment certainly, and nurture certainly has a big part to play. So I don't know that we can cancel out the epigenetic influences, but we can certainly minimize them in how we parent and how we relate to younger people, and the stage that we set for future generations.
Do you think that tracing and knowing what our epigenetic predisposition might be in that regard? So, there's cultures, I mean, the Native American cultures have been traumatized. The Irish people were
Yeah,
traumatized. The Jews were traumatized. And if you come from those backgrounds, knowing what the trauma was, do you think that's going to be helpful in
absolutely.
mitigating?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you can't heal what you don't know about, right?
Exactly.
So knowing about it and appreciating both the good things that were part of those cultures as well as the harmful things is super important, because the good things help us heal.
Do you feel that we have the power through our personal healing to impact our culture? Just
Absolutely.
energetically, do you think that that can
Absolutely.
be passed
Oh,
forward?
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because if we're not passing on the healing, we're passing on the other stuff. If we're not passing on love and compassion and connectedness, then we're passing on the opposites of those.
Yes, pretty awe-inspiring, isn't it? Isn't this an alchemical time? Don't we have opportunities
Yes.
now
Yes.
because of all this trauma that we didn't have in the past?
Oh, absolutely. And tools, and opportunities for connecting with each other that people have never had in previous generations.
Mm. Well, Carolyn, we've come to that time in the show when I have to ask you, what is your mission?
My mission is to continue to educate, to provide, as much healing as I can. I do spiritual counseling and coaching, life coaching for people who are waking up to our predicament and want to help integrate that in their lives and want to know how they can do what they need to do and be what they need to be. So that is certainly my healing work. I continue to write books. And, most recently, I'm very fascinated with the marriage, not only of of activism and spirituality, but science and spirituality. I
Boy, that
think
one's a
we have
long
a lot
time
to,
coming.
yeah, we have a
Yes.
lot to learn in seeing how those two are not separate, but absolutely connected.
And it's interesting, they're both seeking the same thing. They're seeking to
Yes,
understand
yes,
life. So it's got to be a
absolutely.
collision course, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, if what you say is true, if what we're looking at is there's this major crisis going on, we're not the only ones at risk here. What about the animals?
Well, yeah, Andrew and I wrote a wonderful book, that is included in Radical Regeneration, Saving Animals from Ourselves. And we are increasingly scientifically learning how much like us these other animals are. We have to remember we are animals. And so we're really finding out that they have amazing gifts to offer us emotionally, spiritually, physically. And we have the opportunities to help them, to ease their pain, to appreciate them, to allow more of them to grow and reproduce, to hold back some of the extinction that is happening. Um, and we need them. We need those animals in our lives, and they need us. So yes, let's have this love affair with, these animal brothers and sisters who are so precious and so available to heal us.
What lesson do you think animals hold for us about living on the planet?
Oh, being in their bodies and being in the moment and appreciating everything around them, because they can't live without everything around them. And so they value it. and they're completely at home and comfortable with it.
And we've becoming embodied is
Yes,
something that we have to strive for before we can
yeah,
turn this around, is it not?
absolutely,
Mhm,
absolutely. Yeah.
mhm, mhm. I don't I wonder if being in our heads exclusively has really kind of led us down this path.
Oh, absolutely. I could not agree more.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's part of the disconnection from our bodies, disconnection from our emotions, and certainly disconnection from animals.
And each other.
Absolutely. And the
Mhm.
earth.
And the list goes on and on.
This goes on and on.
So, you're there in beautiful Colorado. What's the future for you? Are you going to stay there in the country, or are you going to go into the city and become activists?
Well, I'm about 30 miles from Denver, so I don't have to go far. But I'm in a wonderful area here, which is very ecologically aware, and a lot of spiritual awareness around here as well. I'm very comfortable in Boulder, and I'm just going to continue to write and do what I'm doing as long as I can.
Well, that's a wonderful thing. And unfortunately, we are out of time. But Carolyn, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Our guest this hour has been Carolyn Baker, the author of 15 books, including her latest, Radical Regeneration, Sacred Activism, and the Renewal of the World. Her website, carolynbaker.net. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. Please be sure to join us right here next time as this mission continues, bringing information, resources, and support to an evolving world.